In the gleaming world of private aviation, where success is measured in altitude and influence, Marcus Bennett stood at the pinnacle of achievement. But on a misty morning at Teterboro Airport, his carefully constructed reality would shatter in the cold click of handcuffs, proving that even a private jet couldn't fly above society's deepest prejudices. What happens when a man who has conquered the business world discovers that success alone isn't enough to overcome the color of his skin? Let's stick around to find out. But before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from today. If you enjoy this tale, don't forget to subscribe. Marcus Bennett stood motionless beside his newly acquired Gulfstream G650, his hand resting gently on its pristine white surface. At 42, he had finally achieved what once seemed impossible, owning his own private jet. The early morning sun cast a golden glow across the aircraft's sleek frame, and for a moment, he was transported back to his childhood. In the struggling neighborhoods of Southside Chicago, 10-year-old Marcus would sit on his worn-out porch steps, eyes fixed on the sky. The roar of engines from O'Hare International Airport was his daily symphony. His mother, Angela Bennett, worked tirelessly as a cleaning staff member at the airport, often taking double shifts to make ends meet. "Marcus, baby, finish your homework before I get home," she would say every morning before leaving for work. But instead of staying inside, he would sneak out to the airport fence after school, watching planes take off and land until dusk. There, he would wait for his mother's shift to end, sketching airplanes in his tattered notebook. One evening, catching him drawing yet another plane, his mother didn't scold him as he expected. Instead, she sat beside him, her uniform still carrying the scent of industrial cleaner. "You know, Marcus," she said, her voice soft but firm, "you can achieve anything if you dare to dream and work hard enough. These planes? They could be yours someday." Those words became his compass. Through high school, Marcus threw himself into robotics and computer science. His breakthrough came senior year when he built a self-learning robot from salvaged parts, a project that caught MIT's attention. The full scholarship that followed was his ticket out of Chicago. College life wasn't easy. Between classes, Marcus juggled 3 jobs: morning shifts at a coffee shop, evening tutoring sessions, and weekend work at a tech repair store. Sleep became a luxury, but his mother's words kept him going. He graduated summa cum laude, turning down 6-figure offers from Silicon Valley giants. He had bigger dreams. Horizon Technologies started in his garage with $5,000, his entire savings. The first year was brutal. Sleeping on a futon, living on ramen noodles, and coding for 18 hours a day. His breakthrough came with an innovative AI algorithm that could predict machine failures before they happened. Industry giants took notice. Now, 15 years later, Horizon Technologies employed over 2,000 people globally. Their AI solutions were revolutionizing everything from healthcare to space exploration. The company's valuation had just hit $1.2 billion, but for Marcus, this private jet represented something more personal. A promise kept to that little boy watching planes from a Chicago fence. As he stood there reminiscing, Sarah Chun, his trusted CFO, approached with a tablet in hand. "Everything's ready for the Blackstone meeting," she said, her efficiency as sharp as ever. "The presentation for the $500 million AI healthcare project is loaded. All certificates and documentation for the flight are triple-checked." Marcus nodded, his hands still on the plane's surface. "You know, Sarah," he said quietly, "my mother never got to see any of this. She passed away during my second year at MIT. But standing here now, I know she can see me. She always said I could fly, and today, I'm not just flying, I'm soaring." As the sun rose higher, casting long shadows across the private hangar, Marcus straightened his tie and checked his watch. In a few hours, they would be in Boston, potentially closing the biggest deal in the company's history. But for now, he allowed himself one more moment to savor this victory. Not just for himself, but for that little boy who dared to dream, and the mother who taught him how to soar. The early morning mist hung low over Teterboro Airport, creating an ethereal atmosphere as Marcus Bennett's black Bentley glided to a stop outside the private hangar. The digital display on the dashboard read 5:30 a.m., and the air carried that peculiar crispness unique to dawn. Sarah Chen, his trusted CFO, emerged first, her heels clicking purposefully on the concrete as she checked her tablet one last time. "Everything's in order," she confirmed, her breath visible in the cool air. "Flight plan filed, weather cleared, and Boston's expecting us at 7:45. Marcus stepped out, adjusting his Brioni suit, a reminder of how far he'd come from the second-hand clothes of his youth. The Gulfstream G650 waited ahead, its sleek silhouette barely visible through the morning haze. From their security booth, Robert Wells and David Cooper watched intently, their attention caught by the unusual early morning arrival. "That's not the usual crowd," Wells muttered to Cooper, reaching for his radio. Both were new transfers to the private hangar section, eager to prove themselves. They watched as Marcus strode confidently toward the jet, his presence commanding yet somehow triggering their suspicions. "Sir," Wells called out, emerging from the booth with surprising speed. "This is a restricted area. I need to see some identification." His hand rested casually near his weapon, a gesture Marcus noticed immediately. Marcus maintained his composure, though his jaw tightened slightly. "Of course," he replied, reaching slowly for his wallet. "I'm Marcus Bennett, owner of this aircraft. My flight plan was filed yesterday." Sarah stepped forward, her tablet ready. "I have all the documentation right here. Mr. Bennett is the CEO of Horizon Technologies. We have a scheduled departure." "Ma'am, I'm speaking to him," Wells interrupted, barely glancing at her. His eyes remained fixed on Marcus, scrutinizing every movement. "Sir, how did you come to be in possession of this aircraft?" The question hung in the air, its implications clear. Marcus felt a familiar weight settle in his chest, the weight of having to justify his very presence in spaces he'd rightfully earned. "I purchased it through standard channels last month. All ownership documentation is properly filed." Cooper had joined them now, positioning himself slightly behind Marcus. "We've had reports of suspicious activities in this area," he stated, his tone suggesting Marcus was somehow connected to these alleged incidents. "What kind of suspicious activities?" Marcus asked, maintaining his professional demeanor despite the growing tension. The morning mist had begun to lift, revealing more airport staff gathering at a distance, watching the scene unfold. Instead of answering, Wells spoke into his radio. "Security to dispatch, requesting police presence at Hangar 7. Possible unauthorized access situation." The code words were carefully chosen, but their meaning was clear. Sarah's voice took on an edge of frustration. "This is ridiculous. We have every required document. Mr. Bennett is a respected business leader." "Step back, ma'am," Cooper ordered, cutting her off again. "Sir, please remain where you are. Police are en route." Within minutes, a patrol car pulled up, lights flashing silently. Officers John Martinez and Lisa Thompson emerged, their expressions already set with preconceptions based on the call they'd received. "What seems to be the problem here?" Martinez asked, directing his question to Wells rather than Marcus. "Subject claims ownership of this aircraft," Wells reported, as if the very idea was suspicious. Says he's some kind of CEO. Marcus stood perfectly still, decades of experience guiding his responses. Officers, I can provide all necessary documentation. This is clearly a misunderstanding. Sir, please place your hands where we can see them, Thompson interrupted, her hand moving to her belt. We've had multiple reports of suspicious individuals in this area. The absurdity of the situation might have been amusing if it weren't so familiar. Here he stood in a custom suit, with every possible document proving his identity and ownership, being treated like an intruder on his own property. I'm reaching for my credentials, Marcus announced clearly, moving his hand slowly toward his inner pocket. But before he could retrieve them, Martinez stepped forward. Turn around, sir. Hands behind your back. Is this really necessary? Sarah protested, her voice rising. Do you have any idea who? Ma'am, step back or you'll be detained as well, Thompson warned. Marcus felt the cold metal of handcuffs close around his wrists, the click echoing in the quiet morning air. Through the hangar's windows, he could see his pilot watching helplessly from the cockpit, and other airport staff gathering, phones discreetly recording the scene. Marcus Bennett, he stated calmly, even as the cuffs tightened, CEO of Horizon Technologies. Every document you need is in my briefcase or can be verified through my assistant. But they weren't listening anymore. The narrative had already been written in their minds. A black man in an expensive suit couldn't possibly belong here, couldn't possibly own this jet. Success, Marcus realized yet again, was no shield against prejudice. As they led him toward the security office, Sarah's voice carried across the hangar, I'm calling our lawyers. But Marcus knew this wasn't about laws or rights anymore. This was about something much deeper, something that no amount of wealth or success could fully protect him from. The morning sun had finally broken through the mist, illuminating the Gulf Stream's polished surface. His dream achieved, only to become the setting for this humiliation. The irony wasn't lost on him as the security office door closed behind them, temporarily sealing him off from the world he'd worked so hard to build. The fluorescent lights in the interrogation room buzzed incessantly, casting harsh shadows across Marcus Bennett's face. The room was deliberately small, designed to make its occupants feel confined, uncomfortable. But Marcus sat straight-backed in the metal chair, his expensive suit jacket folded neatly over the back, his tie still perfectly knotted. Would you like to contact your attorney? Officer Thompson asked, her tone suggesting it would be the wise choice. No, Marcus replied calmly, his hands folded on the scratched metal table. I have nothing to hide. The truth is sufficient. As Officer Martinez began his questioning, Marcus's mind drifted to a night 6 months ago. He had made reservations at Le Cirque for an important client dinner. Despite his confirmation email, the maitre d' had looked at him with thinly veiled suspicion. I'm sorry, sir, but we have no record of your reservation. Even after pulling up the confirmation on his phone, showing his American Express black card, they had seated him near the kitchen. The client had been embarrassed, apologetic. Marcus had simply smiled, ordered an expensive bottle of wine, and closed the deal anyway. Mr. Bennett, Martinez's voice pulled him back to the present. Can you explain how you acquired such an expensive aircraft? Through legitimate business success, Marcus answered, his voice steady. My company, Horizon Technologies, went public 2 years ago. Every transaction is documented and publicly available. Another memory surfaced. His first day in his new office building. The security guard had stopped him at the entrance, despite the fact that his name and photo were on the wall behind the desk. "Sir, this is a private building. Do you have an appointment?" "Your company records show significant growth in the past few years," Thompson interjected, scanning through papers. "That's unusual in the tech sector." Marcus allowed himself a small smile. "Not unusual for companies that innovate. We developed breakthrough AI security protocols. Our success is well documented in Forbes, Wall Street Journal, and anyone can claim anything these days," Martinez cut in, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice now. As they continued their questioning, Marcus heard his mother's voice from long ago. "Baby, they might not respect your money, but they can't take away your dignity. That's yours to keep or give away." He had been 15, crying after being followed around a department store by security. She had wiped his tears, straightened his shoulders, and taught him about maintaining grace under pressure. The door opened, and a younger officer, Amy Rodriguez, entered with a tablet in hand. Her eyes widened slightly as she looked from the screen to Marcus. "Sir," she interrupted Martinez mid-question, "I think you need to see this." She handed over the tablet, showing a Forbes cover story, "Horizon's Rising Star: How Marcus Bennett is Revolutionizing Cybersecurity." The atmosphere in the room shifted perceptibly. Martinez scrolled through the article, his face growing increasingly uncomfortable. Thompson began gathering her papers, suddenly avoiding eye contact. "Mr. Bennett," Rodriguez spoke directly to him, "I apologize for the confusion. I recognize you from your TED Talk on AI ethics last year." Marcus maintained his composed demeanor, even as he noticed Martinez's complexion reddening. Within minutes, the precinct captain, James Sullivan, burst into the room. "Mr. Bennett, there's been a terrible mistake," Sullivan began, his words tumbling out. "We'll have you released immediately. Your aircraft is ready for departure." As they removed his handcuffs, Marcus stood slowly, straightening his cuffs with deliberate care. He could see the panic in their eyes, the fear of lawsuits, bad press, career damage. "Your belongings are all here," Thompson said, pushing his briefcase across the table. "Again, we deeply regret." "Thank you, officers," Marcus interrupted quietly but firmly. "I trust this incident will be documented properly in your reports." As he collected his things, Marcus caught his reflection in the two-way mirror. He saw what they had failed to see. Not just a successful businessman, but a man who had learned to carry his dignity like armor, who understood that sometimes the most powerful response to prejudice was unwavering professionalism. Walking out of the interrogation room, Marcus passed young officers watching him with a mix of shame and curiosity. He thought about all the others who had faced similar situations without the shield of success to protect them, without Forbes articles to validate their existence. His phone buzzed, Sarah texting about the delayed meeting in Boston. But for a moment, Marcus stood in the precinct hallway, remembering his mother's words about dignity. She had been right. It wasn't something others could take away. But she hadn't told him how heavy it would be to carry, how exhausting it was to maintain composure while others questioned your very right to exist in spaces you had earned. As he emerged into the morning sunlight, Marcus straightened his tie one final time. The day wasn't over yet, and there were still battles to be fought, meetings to attend, and a world to change, one prejudiced assumption at a time. Police Chief Thomas Wilson stood in his office, his face etched with concern as he faced Marcus Bennett. The morning sun streamed through the windows, highlighting the beads of sweat on the chief's forehead. "Mr. Bennett, I cannot express how deeply sorry we are for this incident," Wilson began, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. "We're prepared to offer substantial compensation, and naturally, we'd appreciate your discretion in this matter." Sarah Chun, who had been pacing the room, stopped abruptly. "Discretion?" Her voice carried a sharp edge. "Your officers handcuffed a prominent CEO on his own property without cause. We should be discussing legal action." Marcus remained silent, his fingers drumming thoughtfully on the arm of his chair. The chief's offer hung in the air. A quick, quiet resolution. The easy way out. But something deeper stirred in his thoughts. "We can have the paperwork drawn up immediately," Wilson continued, reaching for his desk drawer. "The amount would be—" "No." Marcus's voice was soft but firm, stopping Wilson mid-reach. "I have a different proposition in mind." Before he could elaborate, his phone buzzed. The emergency board meeting he'd called was about to begin. "Chief Wilson, I'll have my office contact you with my terms. For now, I have another matter to attend to." The tension in Horizon Technologies' boardroom was palpable. Executive faces lined both sides of the mahogany table, their expressions ranging from concern to outright fear. The morning's events had already sparked whispers in certain circles. "The stock market opens in an hour," Gerald Matthews, head of legal, announced grimly. "If this gets out—" "When this gets out," Sarah corrected, pulling up a presentation. Several airport employees recorded the incident. "It's only a matter of time." Graphs and projections filled the screen behind her. Potential stock drops, client concerns, project delays. The numbers painted a stark picture of what public controversy could do to their carefully built empire. "We recommend immediate damage control," Matthews continued. "Accept their settlement, sign the NDAs, move on. We can't afford negative publicity with the Blackstone deal pending." Marcus sat at the head of the table, unusually quiet. The room fell silent as he stood, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Below, the city was awakening, unaware of the decision being made 50 stories above. "When I started this company," he began, his voice carrying clearly across the room, "I promised myself it would be more than just another tech giant. We would stand for something." He turned to face the board. "Today, we have a choice. We can take the money, sign the papers, and perpetuate a system that allows these incidents to keep happening. Or—" Sarah leaned forward. Or we can use this moment to create real change." Marcus's eyes lit up with determination. "I'm declining any financial settlement. Instead, I want to work with the airport to implement comprehensive reform." The room erupted in protests. Matthews jumped to his feet. "Marcus, be reasonable. The shareholders will understand that long-term change is more valuable than short-term profits," Marcus cut in. "I'm proposing a complete overhaul of their training programs, new diversity initiatives, and a scholarship fund for minority students interested in aviation." "And if they refuse?" Sarah asked, though her expression showed she already knew his answer. "Then we go public. Not with accusations, but with solutions. We show them, and the world, a better way forward." The room fell silent again. But this time it was different. The fear was replaced by something else, understanding, perhaps even pride. "Sometimes," Marcus continued, his voice softening, "the opportunity to create change is more valuable than money. We're not just a tech company. We're leaders. It's time we acted like it." He picked up his phone, beginning to dial Chief Wilson's number. "Sarah, cancel the Blackstone meeting. Some things are more important than business deals." As the board members watched their CEO, many saw him in a new light. This wasn't just about one incident at an airport. It was about setting a precedent, about using power and privilege to create meaningful change. "One more thing," Marcus added, his hand on the doorknob. "Contact HR. I want Robert Wells and David Cooper, the security officers from this morning, involved in developing the new training program. Sometimes the best advocates for change are those who've seen the need for it firsthand." As he left the boardroom, Marcus felt lighter than he had all morning. His mother's words echoed in his mind. "Success isn't just about climbing the ladder, baby. It's about sending it back down for others to climb too." Today, he wasn't just sending down a ladder. He was building an elevator. 2 weeks after the incident, Marcus Bennett stood before a diverse group of airport staff in a converted conference room. The space, usually reserved for flight crew briefings, was now filled with security personnel, administrators, and management teams. The tension in the room was palpable. "Change," Marcus began, his voice carrying the weight of experience, "doesn't start with policies. It starts with understanding." He clicked to the first slide, showing the viral photo of himself in handcuffs. Several security officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, including Robert Wells. The Airport Reform Committee, as Marcus had named it, was his alternative to legal action. Instead of lawsuits and settlements, he proposed a comprehensive transformation program. The airport's management, eager to avoid negative publicity, had agreed to every term. "Today, we're launching 3 initiatives," Marcus continued. First, the Horizon Aviation Scholarship Fund, providing opportunities for minority students in aviation and airport management. Second, a complete overhaul of security training protocols. And third, the establishment of a community oversight board. In the back of the room, Sarah Chun was taking notes, occasionally glancing at the faces of the attendees. Some showed skepticism, others guilt, and a few displayed genuine interest. "But before we discuss these programs," Marcus said, setting aside his presentation remote, "I want to share something personal." He moved to the center of the room, deliberately removing the barrier of the podium between himself and his audience. "When I was 12, my father sat me down for what he called the talk. Not about birds and bees, but about survival. About how to act around authority figures. About how success doesn't shield you from prejudice, it just changes its form." The room grew silent. Even the skeptics seemed to lean forward. 2 weeks ago, I lived that lesson again, right here, in what I thought was my space. His eyes met Wells, who didn't look away this time. "But today, we have a choice. We can let that moment remain a source of division, or we can turn it into a catalyst for change." As Marcus outlined the new training programs, something unexpected happened. Robert Wells raised his hand. "Mr. Bennett," he said, his voice slightly shaky, "I'd like to say something." Marcus nodded, and Wells stood, facing his colleagues. "My son," he began, then paused, collecting himself. "My son Marcus, yes, that's his name, is a pilot. He's 24, graduated from the Air Force Academy. He's also black. His mother is from Ethiopia." The revelation sent a ripple through the room. Wells continued, his voice growing stronger. "When I detained Mr. Bennett, I was doing what I thought was my job. But watching that video later, all I could think about was my son. How someone could do the same thing to him, no matter his uniform, no matter his achievements." Marcus watched as Wells' words transformed the atmosphere in the room. This wasn't just about policies anymore. It was about human connection. "I'd like to volunteer," Wells said, "not just for the training, but to help develop it. Because next time, and God help us, there will be a next time. I want the officer involved to see someone's son, not just a suspect." The plot twist nobody expected. The man who had initiated Marcus's detention was now volunteering to become part of the solution. Over the next few hours, more stories emerged. A TSA agent shared her experience with racial profiling as a hijab-wearing Muslim. A Latino supervisor described the assumptions he faced daily. Each story built bridges of understanding, transforming the sterile conference room into a space of healing and growth. Marcus adapted his program on the spot, incorporating these personal experiences into the training framework. The Community Oversight Board would include representatives from various backgrounds, ensuring multiple perspectives in security decisions. The Horizon Aviation Scholarship Fund would not just provide financial support, but would include mentorship programs, connecting recipients with industry professionals who understood their challenges. As the session ended, Wells approached Marcus privately. My son is flying in next week, he said. Would you consider meeting him? Your story. It's given me a new way to talk to him about his experiences. Marcus looked at the man who had handcuffed him just weeks ago, seeing not an opponent but a potential ally in the fight for change. Bring him to my office, he replied. Better yet, let's have dinner. All of us. Walking out of the conference room, Marcus felt something he hadn't expected: hope. Not the naive hope of his younger years, but a mature understanding that real change happens in these small moments of connection, in the quiet revelations that transform adversaries into advocates. Sarah caught up with him in the hallway. That went better than expected, she said, reviewing her notes. But are you sure about dinner with Wells and his son? Marcus smiled, remembering his mother's words about dignity and grace. Sometimes, Sarah, the biggest changes start with the smallest gestures. Wells could have stayed silent, protected his position. Instead, he chose to be vulnerable, to share his truth. That deserves recognition. As they walked through the airport, Marcus noticed subtle changes already taking place. Security officers making eye contact, offering respectful nods. Staff from different departments engaging in conversation. Small shifts, perhaps, but like the first cracks in a dam, they promised more significant changes to come. The incident that could have ended in bitter legal battles was transforming into something more powerful, a catalyst for genuine understanding and systemic change. And it all started with one man's decision to see beyond retaliation to possibility, beyond punishment to progress. 6 months later, a familiar black Bentley pulled up to Teterboro Airport. The morning sun painted the sky in shades of amber, but unlike that fateful day, there was no mist to obscure the view. Marcus Bennett stepped out, adjusting his suit, a ritual that now carried different meaning. Robert Wells stood waiting at the entrance, not in his security uniform but in a crisp business suit. As the new director of diversity and security training, he had traded his patrol duties for a leadership role in implementing the changes he helped design. Good morning, Marcus. Wells greeted him warmly, extending his hand. The formality of their first encounter had long since dissolved into genuine respect. Robert, Marcus replied, grasping his hand firmly. How's the new class doing? See for yourself. Wells gestured toward a group of security officers nearby. They were engaged in what appeared to be a morning briefing, led by a hijab-wearing woman. The same TSA agent who had shared her story months ago, now a senior trainer. As they walked through the terminal, Marcus noticed the subtle but significant changes. Security checkpoints operated with professional efficiency, but there was a new warmth in the interactions. Digital displays showcased the airport's commitment to inclusion, featuring success stories from their reform training program. Mr. Bennett, a young voice called out. They turned to see a young black man, perhaps 23, hurrying toward them. He wore a freshly pressed pilot's uniform, his enthusiasm practically radiating from him. I'm James Thompson, he introduced himself, slightly out of breath. I just wanted to thank you. Your scholarship program, it changed my life. Marcus studied the young man's face, seeing in it echoes of his own younger self. You're in the first cohort? Yes, sir. Just got my commercial license, James beamed. But it's more than that. Your story, what you did here. It showed me that success isn't just about making it yourself. It's about creating paths for others. Wells watched the interaction with quiet satisfaction. His own son, Marcus Wells, was now mentoring scholarship recipients, closing a circle none of them could have imagined 6 months ago. What's your ultimate goal, James? Marcus asked, genuinely curious. I want to start an aviation technology company, James replied without hesitation. Something that combines flying with innovation, like what you've done with Horizon. But also, I want to make sure other kids who look like me know it's possible. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest, pride, hope, and a touch of nostalgia all mixed together. He reached into his pocket and handed James his business card. "Come see me next week. I think we should talk about your ideas." As James walked away, clutching the card like a precious talisman, Wells turned to Marcus. "You know, that morning, I never imagined we'd end up here." "Life has a way of coming full circle," Marcus replied, watching a plane take off against the morning sky. "My mother used to tell me something about dreams. She said they're like seeds. They need the right conditions to grow, but once they take root, they can break through any concrete." They stood in comfortable silence, watching more aircraft prepare for departure. The scene was remarkably similar to that morning 6 months ago. Yet everything had changed. The security officers who once viewed difference with suspicion now saw it as strength. The airport that had been a site of humiliation had transformed into a model of progressive change. "You know what else my mother used to say?" Marcus continued, his voice soft with reflection. "Success isn't just about what you achieve. It's about what you inspire others to become." Looking at James just now, I finally understand what she meant. Sarah appeared from the terminal, tablet in hand, ready to brief him about their upcoming meeting. But Marcus held up a hand, asking for one more moment. He wanted to savor this. The sight of planes taking off into the limitless sky, carrying with them not just passengers but possibilities. "We've made real change here, Robert," he said finally. "But our work isn't done." "No," Wells agreed, "but at least now we're on the right flight path." As Marcus headed toward his plane, he passed the spot where he had been handcuffed half a year ago. The memory no longer carried pain. Instead, it reminded him of transformation's power. Sometimes, he realized, the worst moments in our lives become the catalyst for the most meaningful changes, not just for ourselves, but for generations to come. The engine of his Gulfstream hummed to life, but this time, there were no suspicious glances, no questioning of his right to be there. Instead, there was something more powerful. The knowledge that his journey had helped clear the path for others to follow their dreams, unencumbered by the barriers he had faced. As the plane lifted into the morning sky, Marcus thought about James, about Wells' son, about all the young dreamers who would benefit from the changes they'd initiated. His mother had been right. Success wasn't just about personal achievement. It was about using your position to elevate others, about turning moments of injustice into opportunities for lasting change. The airport grew smaller below, but its impact on his life, and the lives of others, would continue to grow. Sometimes, the greatest victories come not from fighting battles, but from transforming battlegrounds into bridges.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so we can keep bringing you the best stories.